tell you the story of Thor and the Giant's Hall. Now, this story takes place before any of the movies that we saw. So this was before Thor lost his hammer and then regained it. So he was still pretty young at the time. And he was traveling with Loki and a young man called Tjalve. That's kind of a funny name to us in English, but it's spelled Tjalve. And he was actually from Earth, from Midgard, but he was for a while one of Thor and Loki's traveling companions. And at this time, they were having some fun and some adventures and traveling around and seeing what they could see. Well, they were traveling, and it had been a couple days since they had had anywhere to stay, so they were getting a little bit hungry, and they saw in the distance this castle. So they walked up to the castle, and as they got to the castle, it just seemed to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It got so big that even when they got to the castle, they looked up and they had to tilt almost backwards to be able to see all the way up to the top of it. It was huge. So they knew this had to be a giant's castle. So then Thor knocked on the door, but nobody answered. Nobody would open the door. But because the gates for the door were so big, they could just squeeze through the gaps through the bars. Imagine being something that big that you could just squeeze through the gap in a gate. That's how big this was. So yes, it was very much a giant's hall. So they got into the giant's hall, and there was a king giant sitting on the throne. And he said, anyone who wants to stay here for the night has to prove their worth. And all these other giants were sitting around. Yes, yes, very much, yes. So the king giant then said, okay, so what can you three do that nobody else can do as well? And Loki said, well, I can eat. I can eat so fast. And it really helped because he was hungry, because it had been a couple of days. So the king said, okay. So brought in these big troughs of food, set them on the floor. And there's these big wooden bowls, but they were really long, and they had all this food in them. And Loki started at one side, and the giant started on the other side. And when they met in the middle, Loki had eaten so fast, he got to the halfway point. But the giant he was eating against had met him at the halfway point. And while Loki had eaten all the meat and all the bread and everything, the giant had eaten not just the meat, but also the bones and the wooden bowl that all the food was in. So the king said, Loki, you did good, but I have to say, my giant's the winner on this one. Okay, now who can do something else? Okay, Tjalve said, well, I can run. I can run so fast. So the king giant said, okay, and set out a course, a big circle for them to run around. And Tjalve and the giant he was running against started off running, and after one lap, the giant was just a little bit ahead of Tjalve, and the other giants were looking, because they were never used to seeing this. And then they got through the second lap, and the giant that Tjalve was running against got to the end and had time enough to look back and see Tjalve still running, but coming up to him. So he was definitely pulling ahead. So the third lap, Tjalve was only halfway through when the giant got to the end and looked back. The king said, I'm sorry, my giant won. Okay, then Thor said, well, I can drink. I can empty a drinking horn like nobody's business. So the king giant had brought in this humongous drinking horn, and he said, even the weakest of us can empty this in 3 drinks. And Thor said, no problem. So he lifted the drinking horn and he drank and he drank and he drank and he drank. And he put it down and there was still all this drink in it. Oh, took another breath. Okay, picked it up, drank it again. Drink, 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 drink. Oh, put it down, just barely lowered it. It's still almost completely full. King said, I'm not very impressed with this so far. Thor said, let me try one more time. Picked it up, drink, 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 drink. Oh, man, it only lowered about 3 inches. Wow. King said, I'm not impressed. I thought you were supposed to be like this god or something. Okay. Then the king said, well, I'll tell you what, even the smallest of us can do this. Just pick up my cat. Okay, so the giant's cat was there in the halls, just standing up, minding its own business. Thor went underneath the cat and started lifting from the cat's belly. And the cat just like arched his back up, and Thor kept lifting and lifting as hard as he could and as high as he could, and managed to get 1 foot of the cat up. And that was it. King said, I'm really not very impressed with you. You're supposed to be a god. Okay. Thor said, give me one more chance. One more chance. I'm a great wrestler. So the king said, okay, well, I won't make this too hard for you because I don't want you to think ill of our hospitality. So in came this little old lady giant. Okay. And Thor started wrestling with her and just could not get her off her feet. Could not. And as they're wrestling and wrestling and wrestling, Thor's trying everything that he knows, and she starts pulling some tricks and almost gets him off his feet, and he gets back on his feet, and he tries again and tries again until finally she forces him down, not all the way down, but down onto one knee. And the king says, well, you know, I'm going to take pity on you because obviously you've been traveling far and you're hungry and tired. We'll just let you rest tonight and it'll be okay. No problem. Like I said, I don't want you to think ill of our hospitality. So then Loki, Thor, and Sjolv spent the night and they had a good meal. Though how Loki still had any room for food, I don't know. But, you know, he's Loki. He can always eat. Anyway, so then the next morning, they wake up and the castle's gone. And there's only one giant standing there. It's the king of the giants. And he's not nearly as big as he was last night. What's going on? Thor says, hey, where's the castle? Where's everything? And the king of the giants said, you scared us. We had heard all these stories about you and we were terrified. Okay, Loki, you would have won your contest if it had been against any giant or anything living. But you were eating in competition against fire, which devours everything in its path. Sjolv, we have never seen anyone run nearly as fast as you. Never. Not mortal, not god, not giant, nothing. You were running against the wind, and no one can catch the wind. Thor, on drinking, you impressed us so much because you drank, but the end of the horn was in the ocean. And you actually drank it down 3 inches and caused what to this day is still known as the ebb tide. So when the ocean comes up, the drinking horn is full. When the ocean goes down, it's the 3 inches that Thor drank. And when you lifted the cat and managed to get one paw off the ground. That was so impressive and so scary, because the illusion I cast was, it looked like my cat, but that was the Midgard serpent, which circles the entire earth with his tail in his mouth. And you actually raised the mountains an entire foot when you did that, which scared us to no end. And finally, Thor, when you were wrestling, we have never seen anyone battle old age nearly as well or nearly as long. So, because of this, and because how much you have scared us, you will never find my real castle or my real people. And this is a story of Thor in the Giant's Hall.